While the first of ancient Israel's new breed of social justice warriors was a simple herdsman, an ancient cowboy of sorts named Amos, it's important to note that he wasn't alone. There was something in the air, a new spirit, inspiring new ideas. It's fair to talk about a creative new age across the ancient world, extending from the 800s to the 200s B.C.E., known as the Axial Age. To the west, it was the age of the great Greek philosophers, including the likes of Socrates and Plato. Far to the east, there was the Buddha, Confucius and Lao Tsu. And in Israel, it's the age of history's first great social justice warriors. Hosea, like Amos, of whom he was a rough contemporary, was headquartered in Israel's northern kingdom, the region known as Samaria, of which he was a native. He's in the tradition of the prophet Elijah and the book of Deuteronomy. But the poetry he writes sets him in a class by himself. When exactly he lived and wrote is somewhat up for grabs. The content of his book seems to be set in the mid to late 8th century or 700s BCE, when northern Israel was already being threatened with extinction by Assyrian invasion. But some suggest that he lived a full century earlier, in the days of the infamous King Ahab. Like so much else, it's debatable. And somebody's right and somebody's wrong. While his message definitely contains themes of hope and restoration, it predominantly centers on gloom and doom, which is a bit ironic given that his name in Hebrew, Hosea, means salvation, or literally, he saves. Of course, it's hard to be a true social justice warrior without conveying a message laden with downers. The prophet brings home his message through his personal life. At the very beginning of his book, he relates that he was given a divine directive to marry a woman of harlotry.
Vayomer Hashem el Hosea, lech, kach lecha eshet znunim, v'yaldei znunim, ki zanot tizne haaretz me'achrei Hashem.
Now, there's an unusual command by anyone's estimation. Did he protest this command? No. He writes of himself in third person.
V'yeled v'yikach et gomer, bat tivlaim, v'tahar v'teled lo ben.
Immediately, we're confronted with issues. Did the prophet really marry a whore? Or is the whole thing just a literary invention designed to illustrate Israel's spiritual harlotry? The first thing we need to do is examine the expression wife of harlotry in the original Hebrew. The term is eshet znunim, literally a woman of whoredom. That could refer either to a promiscuous wife prone to take other lovers, or a sacred prostitute, such as those found in pagan fertility cults. Did Hosea go scouring the streets looking for a prostitute, or frequenting Canaanite temples for one of the sacred whores in the cult of fertility of the god Baal? Or, here's another theory. Perhaps Gomer was a faithful wife when he first married her, only to become unfaithful or even a cult prostitute later on. Looking backward, it then may have seemed to him as if he had been commanded from the outset to marry a woman who was destined to turn to harlotry. As with most academic issues, nobody can prove who's right, so we just choose up sides and duke it out. In any case, the prophet makes no bones about Israel being estranged from her God, like an adulterous wife. According to some scholars, many Israelites actually believed that God had a wife, based on certain ancient inscriptions that read, "To Yah and his Asherah," Asherah being the wife of the Canaanite god Baal. Now, if Asherah was the consort of Israel's God, what does that say about Israelite monotheism? Perhaps, contrary to Kaufman, the Israelites didn't start out being monotheistic at all. Hosea goes on to relate that he has 3 children by his wife of harlotry, all of whom are given symbolic names. There's a son named Jezreel, after the famous battlefield where the renegade prophet Jehu had mercilessly slaughtered the members of the royal house of King Ahab. The people of Israel were destined to suffer divine vengeance for such bloodshed. Then there's a daughter named Lo Ruhamah, which means roughly not loved or without mercy. It's another prophetic message that no mercy will be shown to this people. Finally, a younger son is named Lo Ami, meaning not my people. It's a way of saying that the covenant between Israel and God has been made null and void. Needless to say, these are hardly the names normal parents would be expected to give their children. Hercule Poirot here, who, according to Agatha Christie, is the world's greatest detective. I would point out that the whole naming scenario does seem to square with the idea that Gomer, like Israel, only became a wife of harlotry after her children were born. It only seemed to Hosea, in hindsight, that his marriage to such a woman had been foreordained to make a prophetic point. This must be how God feels, since the covenant people have gone whoring after the likes of Baal. But whereas Amos had railed against social evils, Hosea focused on the inner experience of religion, or lack thereof.
כי חסד חפצתי ולא זבח, ודעת אלוהים מעולות.
The Hebrew watchword was chesed, roughly translated as loving kindness, but implying much more. It's one of the most important concepts in Judaism to this day, having to do with an inward connection with God that far surpasses going through the motions of ritual. For some critics, Hosea is seen to concentrate so much on idolatry and false worship that, unlike Amos, he doesn't have a lot to say about social justice per se. But maybe he's just saying that true social justice must stem from an inner attitude of chesed, which idolatry corrupts. Still, we have to ask, do the prophets in general believe that social justice trumps ritual concerns? Or does social justice flow out of properly observed monotheism? A kindred question is this: was Hosea against the whole sacrificial system and ready to abolish it? Not likely, say most textual critics. But just saying what he said qualifies him as a radical dissident. Then there's the word translated as knowledge. In Hebrew, da'at. Let's not confuse this with the religious knowledge of theology.
נדמו עמי מבלי הדעת, כי אתה הדעת מאסת, ואמסך מכהן לי.
The Hebrew root here is yada, which also means sexual knowledge, as when we're told that Adam knew his wife Eve. The Canaanite god Baal had married the soil, the fertility of which was celebrated through ritual orgies partaken of freely in the sanctuaries of Dan and Bethel. But Israel's God had betrothed his people. The divinely given covenant recorded in the Torah was the ketubah, the marriage contract. It was he, not Baal, who made the earth green. In Hosea's powerful poetic verse, God is depicted as luring Israel like a lover back to him.
לכן הנה אנוכי מפתיה, והולכתיה המדבר, ודיברתי על ליבה, ונתתי לה את כרמיה משם, ואת עמק אחור לפתח תקווה, וענתה שם כימי נעוריה, וכיום עלותה מארץ מצרים. והיה ביום ההוא נאום השם, תקראי אישי, ולא תקראי לי עוד בעלי. והסיר אותי את שמות הבעלים מפיה, ולא יזכרו עוד בשמם. וארסתיך לי לעולם, וארסתיך לי בצדק ובמשפט, ובחסד וברחמים, וארסתיך לי באמונה, וידעת את השם.
There's no way to fully understand this without knowing Hebrew. That's because there's a clever play on words in the passage that only makes sense in Hebrew. The word for husband in Hebrew, even to this day in Israel, happens to be Baal, which, to the huge chagrin of Israeli feminists, carries the double meaning of master. And of course, it also happens to be the name of the ancient Canaanite god. The prophet, with an almost wry sense of humor, is saying that paganism will be so utterly obliterated that even the name for husband will be changed to Ishi, my man. You'll no longer call me my husband, Ba'ali, but my man, Ishi. Brilliant, don't you think? That said, there are a number of issues raised by literary critics. It's pointed out that much of the text seems out of order. The style is homogeneous, but it's often hard to tell who's speaking to whom. It's argued, for example, that only the first 3 chapters are by Hosea himself, and that the rest are by a later unnamed prophet. Let's call him Second or Deutero-Hosea. That, of course, goes back to the question of whether the prophet lived in the 9th century or the 8th century B.C.E. It can, in fact, be argued that if the 2 Hosea theory is correct, then we've got a bridge in the 9th century Hosea between the earlier pre-classical prophets like Elijah and the classical prophets like Isaiah, which means the break between the two might not be so sharp. In any case, Hosea's lightning switches from condemnation to forgiveness might have been enough for him to be dismissed as either a fool or a madman. Condemnation.
כי ימים רבים ישווה בני ישראל, אין מלך ואין שר ואין זבח ואין מצבה ואין אפוד וטרפים.
Forgiveness.
אחר ישובו בני ישראל וביקשו את השם אלוהיהם ואת דוד מלכם ופחדו אל השם ואל טובו באחרית הימים.
Condemnation.
שמעו דבר השם בני ישראל כי ריב להשם עם יושבי הארץ.
Forgiveness.
לכו ונשובה אל השם כי הוא טרף וירפאנו, יח ויחבשנו, יחיינו מיומיים, ביום השלישי יקימנו.
Condemnation.
הקשיבו בית ישראל ובית המלך האזינו, כי לכם המשפט.
Forgiveness.
איך אתנך אפרים, אמגנך ישראל, איך אתנך כאדמה, אשימך כצבועים, נהפך עלי ליבי, יחד נחרמו נחומי. ארפא משובתם, אוהבם נדבה, כי שב אפי ממני.
Perhaps it takes a touch of madness to be classed as a true prophet. And that will be apparent as we turn our gaze to the host of other prophets, speaking truth to power, and whose voices resonate from that day to our own. And the rest is history.